You just paid $500 for a plane ticket. Now imagine there are 200 passengers on your flight. At $500 each, that looks like $100,000 generated by a single airplane in just a few hours. Sounds like an incredible business. Except there's a problem. That $100,000 is not what the airline gets to keep. Before the plane even reaches its destination, the money passengers paid is supporting an enormous machine: fuel, employees, aircraft, maintenance, airports, technology, and dozens of other costs most travelers never see. And your $500 may be even more complicated than it looks, because the person sitting beside you might have paid $250, someone behind you might have paid $800, and a passenger near the front could have paid thousands. So why did you pay $500? Where does that money actually go? And after everyone involved in getting you to your destination has been accounted for, how much is really left? To understand that, we need to follow the money. Imagine your flight has 200 passengers. You paid $500, but the person beside you booked 3 months earlier during a promotion and paid much less. Another passenger booked yesterday because of an urgent business meeting and paid considerably more. Someone else may be traveling using loyalty points, and passengers sitting in premium cabins may have paid several times what many economy passengers paid. Everyone is traveling on the same aircraft. Everyone is going to the same destination, but economically, they are not necessarily buying the same product under the same conditions. This is one of the strange things about airline pricing. A seat does not have one permanent price. Its price can change based on demand, competition, booking timing, remaining inventory, travel dates, fare conditions, and many other factors. Imagine an empty seat on a flight leaving 3 months from now. The airline has time to sell it. Now imagine the same seat is still empty tomorrow morning, just hours before departure. Economically, the situation has changed. Time is running out. The airline has to decide what that remaining capacity is worth. Meanwhile, a traveler who suddenly needs to fly tomorrow may value that seat very differently from someone casually planning a holiday 6 months ahead. So airlines use revenue management systems to continuously manage how seats are sold. They are not simply asking, what does this seat cost? They are effectively trying to solve a much harder problem. How much revenue can we generate from a limited number of seats before those seats disappear forever? Because once that airplane leaves, every unsold seat loses its opportunity to generate passenger revenue for that flight. We'll come back to that. First, you paid $500. The money has entered the airline system. Now the expenses begin. And one of the biggest is something you probably saw before you even boarded: fuel. Commercial aircraft require enormous quantities of jet fuel. The amount needed depends on factors including the aircraft, route, distance, payload, weather, and operating conditions. And fuel prices can change. This creates an interesting problem. An airline may sell your ticket weeks or months before you fly. But between the day you buy that ticket and the day the aircraft takes off, operating conditions can change. The ticket has already been sold, but the economics of operating the flight are not frozen in time. And fuel is only one part of the machine. Someone has to fly the aircraft. Pilots. Someone has to look after passengers. Cabin crew. Someone has to load baggage. Someone has to inspect and maintain the aircraft. Someone has to plan flights, manage operations, handle customers, run reservation systems, maintain technology, coordinate schedules, and respond when something goes wrong. When you buy a plane ticket, you are not simply paying for a chair moving through the sky. You are buying access to an enormous coordinated operating system, and at the center of that system is one extremely expensive asset: the aircraft itself. Airlines can acquire aircraft in different ways. Some are purchased. Some are financed. Many are leased. But however an airline gains access to an aircraft, operating a fleet creates significant financial commitments. Then there is maintenance. Aircraft require inspections. Parts wear out. Engines require extensive maintenance. Components need repair or replacement. Safety and regulatory requirements must be met. Insurance matters. Airport and operational costs matter. Technology matters. And here is where airline economics becomes especially unforgiving. Imagine 2 identical airplanes. One is flying throughout the day, carrying paying passengers and cargo. The other is sitting on the ground because of a mechanical problem. The grounded aircraft may have stopped generating productive flying revenue, but many costs associated with having that aircraft do not magically disappear at the same moment. This is why airlines care so much about using their aircraft productively. An airplane is valuable when it is safely moving people and goods where demand exists. Sitting still can become expensive, but there is another asset airlines cannot afford to waste: your seat. Imagine a flight with 200 seats. The doors close with 15 seats empty. The airplane takes off. What happens to those 15 seats? Nothing. And that is exactly the problem. They cannot be placed in a warehouse and sold tomorrow. The airline cannot say, "We had 15 unused seats yesterday, so today we have 15 extra seats to sell." Those revenue opportunities vanished when the flight departed. Airline seats are a form of perishable inventory. Once the departure happens, the opportunity to sell an empty seat on that flight is gone. This creates enormous pressure to fill aircraft. But here comes the contradiction. A full airplane does not automatically mean a highly profitable airplane. Imagine 2 flights. Flight A has 200 seats. Every single seat is occupied, but many passengers bought deeply discounted fares. Now imagine Flight B. Only 170 seats are occupied, but the average passenger paid considerably more, and several premium seats generated strong revenue. Which flight performed better financially? You cannot answer simply by counting passengers. You would need to know how much revenue each flight generated, and what each flight cost to operate. This is why seeing a packed airplane does not tell you how profitable the airline is. A full plane tells you that the seats were filled. It does not tell you whether they were sold at economically attractive prices. And your original $500? That may not even be the end of what you spend. Maybe you check a bag. Depending on the airline and fare, that could cost extra. Maybe you want a particular seat. There may be a charge. Priority services? Another possible purchase. Food, Wi-Fi, an upgrade. Airlines can generate additional revenue from services surrounding the basic journey. These are broadly known as ancillary revenues. This changes the economics of the customer. An airline may not see you simply as one passenger, one ticket. Your journey can contain several separate transactions. The base fare gets you into the system. Then additional choices can increase the total amount you spend. But even that does not reveal the entire business, because one of the most interesting ways airlines can generate economic value may involve something you cannot physically see: miles. Think about a travel rewards credit card. You use the card to buy groceries, fuel, clothes, maybe dinner. You earn points or miles, but you did not board an airplane. So how can this create value for an airline? The exact arrangements vary, but partnerships between airlines and financial institutions can make loyalty programs economically significant. A financial institution may purchase loyalty currency as part of its rewards relationship with an airline. The customer earns rewards. The financial institution gets a product designed to attract and retain cardholders. And the airline generates revenue while strengthening its relationship with travelers. Now something interesting happens. You may choose that airline more often because you have accumulated miles. You may use the associated card more frequently. You may seek elite status. You may redeem rewards. You become increasingly connected to an ecosystem. So the airline is no longer simply trying to monetize the moment when you sit on an airplane. It can create economic value from a longer customer relationship. And this reveals something important. An airline is not necessarily just a transportation company. It can also operate a sophisticated loyalty and partnership business wrapped around transportation. But there is another source of revenue hiding much closer to you, directly underneath your seat: cargo. When you sit inside a passenger aircraft, the space beneath the passenger cabin can carry more than your suitcase. Depending on the flight and aircraft, commercial cargo may travel below passengers: mail, electronics, pharmaceutical products, e-commerce shipments, other goods moving through global supply chains. This means one aircraft can potentially generate economic value from two layers simultaneously: passengers above, cargo below. And dedicated cargo airlines take this model even further. So now look at the business we have uncovered: passenger tickets, different fare levels, premium cabins, additional services, loyalty partnerships, cargo. That sounds like an impressive number of ways to make money, which creates an obvious question. If airlines have so many revenue opportunities, why can they still get into serious financial trouble? The answer becomes clearer when you imagine what happens when the system is disrupted. Imagine an airline operating normally. Aircraft are moving. Passengers are booking. Cargo is flowing. Money is entering the business. Now suddenly remove a large portion of passenger demand. Revenue can fall dramatically. But the aircraft still exist. Financing commitments may still exist. Lease obligations may remain. Maintenance requirements do not simply disappear. Technology systems still have to operate. Infrastructure still exists. Many costs can be reduced over time. But the problem is speed. Revenue can collapse much faster than many costs can adjust, and disruption does not require one specific event. A recession can weaken travel demand. A major health crisis can restrict travel. Geopolitical conflict can close airspace and force longer routes. Fuel prices can rise. Aircraft can be grounded. Severe weather can cancel flights. And airline networks create another complication. Everything is connected. One delayed aircraft can affect another flight. Passengers can miss connections. Baggage may need rerouting. Crews can reach working time limits. Travelers may need rebooking. Disruption in one city can spread through an entire network. This is why enormous revenue numbers can be misleading when viewed alone. Revenue tells you how much money flows into a business. It does not tell you how much remains after operating that business. Which brings us back to your original $500. Where did it go? There is no universal answer. You cannot say that every $500 airline ticket always sends exactly this much to fuel, this much to employees, this much to the aircraft, and this much to profit. The economics vary by airline, by route, by aircraft, by country, by fare, by fuel prices, by taxes and fees, and by operating conditions. But conceptually, your money entered an enormous system. Part of the revenue supports getting the aircraft into the air: fuel, pilots, cabin crew, maintenance, aircraft ownership, financing, or leasing, airports, ground operations, technology, administration, and many other costs involved in operating an airline. Meanwhile, the airline is trying to generate additional value from the limited capacity it controls. Different fares, premium seating, optional services, cargo, loyalty partnerships, all while managing risks that can change remarkably quickly. So what does an airline really sell? At first, the answer seems obvious: a seat. But that seat is only the visible product. Behind it is a transportation network, a pricing system, a scheduling machine, a logistics operation, a technology platform, a cargo network, a loyalty ecosystem, and a massive collection of people and physical assets that all have to work together. That is why airlines can carry millions of passengers, generate billions in revenue, operate enormous fleets, and still remain financially vulnerable. Because enormous revenue does not automatically mean enormous profit. At the beginning, Your $500 looked simple. You paid money. You received a seat. You flew somewhere. But now that same transaction looks very different. Your seat was only the visible tip of an enormous economic machine. So, the next time you board a packed airplane and think, this airline must be making a fortune. Maybe. But a full airplane only tells you how many seats were filled. It does not tell you what every passenger paid. It does not tell you what the flight cost to operate. And it certainly does not tell you how much money survived after everything required to make that flight possible was paid for. So perhaps the more interesting question is not, why did my plane ticket cost $500? It is, where did that $500 actually go? And plane tickets are not the only everyday purchases hiding a much bigger economic story. Imagine walking into a supermarket and spending $100. The store receives your money. But it had to buy the products, pay employees, operate the building, keep food refrigerated, move inventory through warehouses, absorb spoiled and unsold goods, process payments, and compete aggressively on price. So out of the $100 you handed over at checkout, how much does the supermarket actually get to keep? That is another story hiding behind the